Greetings, curious acolytes of the galaxy, and welcome back to our channel. The Old Republic cinematics, are breathtaking as they were, oftentimes left us with a lot of questions about the lore, especially the one titled Knights of the Eternal Throne, Betrayed, where we were shown the childhood of Vaylin, the sister of the twins as begotten by Valkorian. This chilling cinematic showed us a story of heartbreak, torture, and incredible power. Recently, we did a video talking about the story and powers of one of the most mysterious beings of the Old Republic, that being Valkorian's own son in Arcan. In that video analysis, we promised to do a follow-up video explaining Vaylin, whose story happens to parallel the rest of the events of the lore in the Eternal Empire. At the end of the story, we'll be analyzing Vaylin's powers in the Force, and see exactly what made her so deadly and potentially the most powerful of the three. So, let us begin. First though, in preparation of Black Friday, there is a big sale on the Star Wars merch page, where you can already get amazing deals, but if you use code WAVE at checkout, you can also get an additional 15% off your entire order. So if you're looking for some cool Star Wars merchandise, or even Marvel merchandise, be sure to check it out down below. Now, let us begin and open up another holocron. Vaylin was born the youngest of all the children in the Eternal family. Just like her brothers, she had inherited great power from both of her parents. However, Vaylin was unique in the fact that her power was far beyond what Valkorian and his wife Senya had expected from her, clearly having the most Force attunement to all three of the children, even though Valkorian and Senya did not notice this at first. As a small child, Vaylin was able to project the Force in destructive waves and power without even meaning to, and she could use telekinesis, despite not having any formal training in it whatsoever. In fact, fearing her untamed power, her mother Senya actively discouraged her from using the Force, especially in front of her father. As she grew older, Senya oversaw her combat training as Valkorian had once done for Arcan and Thexan. However, it quickly became apparent that her powers in the Force were far too much to be contained, as in one training session, she was unable to properly get the sequences down, and she let her anger out, killing all of the Knights of Zakul around her, simply by lifting them up and crushing them within their very armors unintentionally. She was only stopped when Senya snapped her out of her rage, and as soon as she did, they both saw that her father Valkorian had been watching the whole time, with keen interest. Here, we already see that Vaylin has inherited a great deal of natural power from her father, and even mirrors how he was as a child. Tenebrae, when he was younger if you remember, who would eventually become Valkorian, was so powerful with the Force that he could already force choke and torture someone's mind by the time he was just 5 years old. Of course, Tenebrae, now as Valkorian, recognizes this pattern and realizes that she had the potential to become a great threat to him, being the only one of his children that he viewed as a legitimate threat. So he took her away to the temple on Nathema, lying to Senya about it and saying that she was there to learn discipline. The discipline Vaylin underwent on Nathema was anything but. She was warped, twisted, and broken by months of mental torture by the cultists that resided there, who called themselves the Keepers. By performing many rituals and using a Force-powered machine, the Keepers were actually putting Vaylin through mental conditioning at the command of Valkorian, her very father. The Emperor wanted to make sure that Vaylin would never get out of his control, which was the reason for all of this. Valkorian had assumed that his wife was blissfully unaware of this fact. However, he underestimated her own strength in the Force. Senya was having nightmares and visions about the torture happening to her daughter, and could no longer stand to ignore them. Acting upon her instincts, she donned her armor and saber pike before leaping into action to rescue her child. Despite being within an inch of success after destroying the guard of Force Keepers, Senya would fail her mission, as Vaylin had grown to completely resent her, feeling abandoned. Under all the torment she was suffering, she had deduced that it was her mother's fault for allowing her to be sent there. Senya begged Vaylin to come with her in vain, and before she could do anything else, Valkorian showed up, and Senya was captured and taken away. Vaylin would remain on Nathema for the following years, continuously being put under more and more brainwashing. She hated it there, and her anger towards her parents grew stronger. The only person that ever visited her and made her stay even slightly comfortable was her brother Thexan, who would spend time with her and bring her gifts. Soon though, she was eventually brought back to Zakul around the time that the Eternal Empire had decided to go public and join the raging war in the galaxy that the Jedi and Sith were currently fighting. By this time, Vaylin was no longer the little girl full of life that she had once been. She was twisted and evil, having fully embraced the dark side and completely devoid of love for any being, even her brother Thexan. Now that she had returned, her father presented her with her own yellow lightsaber, like that of her brothers, and she swore fealty to the Eternal Throne. Following the death of Thexan, Vaylin still felt absolutely nothing. It is believed that Vaylin very much served as an assassin for the Eternal Throne, in the background, and being a pure instrument of destruction, while Thexan and Arcan led a more public engagement against the Jedi and Sith. Vaylin was indeed present for her father's quote-unquote death at the hands of Arcan, after she watched her brother destroy their father's body and imprison the Outlander. At first, Vaylin came out and supported Arcan's ascendancy to the Eternal Throne. Arcan would appoint Vaylin as his right hand, and the leader of the Knights of Zakul, after which the two would reign for about 5 years until they became the dominant superpower in the entire galaxy. Suddenly, their mother would make a surprise return, but not in the way that either of them would have thought. Senya found the Outlander, who had been frozen in carbonite all this time, and freed him. Together, the two of them made a grand escape from Zakul, but not without being confronted by Vaylin. Vaylin, who finally demonstrated her raw power in the Force. Vaylin tore entire pieces of buildings off and hurled them at the escapees, showing clearly that she was the most powerful of Valkorian's children. But luckily, the two managed to escape in time. This sprung a long conflict as the Eternal Empire was now at war with the Alliance. Senya had officially joined the Alliance and was now publicly battling against the Eternal Throne, only the more reason for Arcan and Vaylin to hate her. After several more conflicts, Vaylin and Senya would meet up face to face once again, but this time in a fierce duel. Vaylin was indeed powerful, but as we know, she was never the prodigy in melee combat versus Senya, who was once a Knight of Zakul herself. Senya bested her daughter at the blade and had the opportunity to end it all, but couldn't do it. Part of Senya's character is that she loved her children dearly, despite the fact that all three wanted nothing to do with her and thought she was weak. No matter how tyrannical they were, Senya couldn't bring herself to destroy her only daughter. Not after she had already lost her son Thexan. Speaking of which, this was the exact information that Vaylin would use to her advantage. Sensing her mother's inability to kill her, Vaylin decided to throw her even more off balance by revealing the truth of Thexan's death. That Thexan died at the hands of Arcan, a deep secret held by the Eternal Throne. Senya was absolutely shocked to the core about this revelation, as she had been lied to and told that Thexan had died during the war. Using her mother's hesitation, Vaylin made her escape, as the battle around them was no longer in her favor. Sometime after, Arcan would engage with the Outlander in a fierce duel, as they were aboard the flagship, which was in the middle of a battle with the Eternal Fleet, and it was being destroyed very quickly. The Outlander and Arcan were separated by falling debris, which trapped Arcan and would have killed him had Senya not taken pity on her son and attempted to rescue him. While she was digging Arcan out, Vaylin arrived, ready to end her mother once and for all. Senya called out to her daughter and told her that Arcan was hurt and needed her help. However, Vaylin, blinded with hatred, didn't appear to really care for either her brother who was gravely wounded or her mother. Instead, consumed by hatred fully, she ignited her lightsaber and charged in for the kill. Having been awake for all of this, Arcan reached out with the Force and blew Vaylin away so that he and his mother could escape. They managed to make it out, and Vaylin was now convinced that her brother was a traitor, just like her mother. While Arcan was being healed by the Alliance, Vaylin assumed rulership and became Empress of the Eternal Empire. Eventually, the Outlander would face off against Vaylin in their own duel. However, it became apparent that by now, Vaylin's power had grown exponentially. Before she could strike the final blow, however, a grand revelation was made as Valkorian's spirit appeared, revealing himself to have been inside the Outlander the whole time. He didn't wish for Vaylin to kill the Outlander, since he was his current vessel. Vaylin, now enraged at this revelation herself, attempted to destroy the Outlander anyway, but Valkorian then unveiled his secret weapon by saying the words, "Kneel before the Dragon of Zakul." At these words, all of the mental conditioning that Vaylin underwent of Nathema all those years ago was now put to light, and she was seemingly drained of all of her power and left extremely weak. Realizing what had happened, she now understood that her father was still dangerous, and she was barely able to escape once again. She knew exactly what she needed to do, and it all went back to Nathema. Now that she was Empress, that system was under her command, and she ordered the Keepers to undo any conditioning that they had done to her. During this time though, she would be visited by her brother Arcan, who had come to reclaim the throne. Vaylin had come too far to be stopped now, so she ignited her lightsaber and defended her right to rule through violence. Soon though, the Outlander showed up in the middle of their duel, and Vaylin used Arcan's distraction to leave and return to Nathema for her reverse conditioning. The ritual to reverse herself was harsh, as she had to be placed in a force-powered machine and be experimented on once again. However, the Empress was willing to do it if it meant removing the shackles that her father had placed on her. The machine turned on, and she was immediately in agony. But luckily for her, she survived the process. Not only this, but her true powers in the Force were finally brought to the surface. And let me tell you, she was basically now on Starkiller's level of power, rivaling her father as he had feared all those years ago. With her newfound strength, Vaylin decided to test it on her own guards, lifting them all up and throwing them back with enough power to end their lives instantly. She then unleashed her full might by completely destroying the facility that had once held her captive and tortured her. On her own, Vaylin was now a one-person army just in the Force itself, and decided to prove this fact by going to the Alliance base. Arriving on the world of Odessan where the Alliance was currently stationed, she killed 1,000 men simply by using the Force. Finally, the Outlander showed up, and depending on how the player ends the game, they might be joined by Arcan and Senya. For this continuity, we'll say that they chose the light side options, and that they were joined by both Arcan and Senya. The stage was set for the final showdown, and what a battle it was. Vaylin's power was overwhelming, and she threw wave after wave of destructive force powers at them. However, with the combined help, the Outlander managed to fight through the force barrage and end Vaylin's life once and for all, thus finally ending the terrible reign of Empress Vaylin. Of the 3 children of Valkorian, or Vitiate, she was the only one to die without any sign of light within her eyes. Vaylin was one of the most powerful Force users in all of Star Wars lore, being on the same level of those of Starkiller and rivaling the potential of Valkorian himself enough for him to perceive her as a threat, something that is extremely rare, as never once did he ever think of Arcan or Thexan as anything more than a tool. So let's take a look at what Vaylin could do. First off is her powers in telekinesis, which is where we get a great deal of her recognition from. As a young child, she was already adept with being able to lift and manually control small functions with the Force, even though she was discouraged from doing so by her mother. This level of control is usually only seen by Padawans, and she was only a very small child with no formal training. Just by playing with the Force, she was able to use a Force bellow, a bellow that projected a wave of energy which destroyed a suit of armor. This wouldn't be the last time she destroyed armor like this as a child, like we mentioned in the story. Vaylin managed to unleash her powers in training when she lost her temper and easily lifted 7 Knights of Zakul and began crushing them with their own armor while splintering the wooden staffs that one of them held. As an adult, Vaylin was able to conjure storms and whirlwinds with Force energy that could tear and destroy very heavy materials on buildings that even very experienced Sith would struggle to lift. When she had her power unleashed by the machine on Nathema, she was able to do all of these things with minimal effort and was able to cause an entire facility to implode. She could toss around other Force sensitives with ease and was confident in facing enemies without a lightsaber. She proved to be able to conjure Force lightning, and one of her most deadly abilities was her power to control the direction of explosions and fire, as well as the direction of Force lightning from Arcan, changing it at will. At max power, Vaylin was able to single-handedly slay upwards of 1,000 Alliance soldiers with just the Force, and she could exude massive waves of Force energy that only the Outlander managed to resist, purely because of the fact that Valkorian's spirit was protecting him at the time. I believe that if Vaylin had received more training in the ways of the dark side, then she would probably be able to surpass maybe her own father in terms of power, or at least could have gotten close. In conclusion, Vaylin proves that when 2 powerful Force sensitives have offspring, then they tend to collect the potential of both of their parents. This was something that we already know, but Vaylin shows us that when you aren't proactive in having them trained from an early age, they can become a loose cannon that will cause problems for just about everyone, even Valkorian, who is widely considered to have been the most powerful Sith Lord in all of Star Wars lore, with his only rival being Sidious. And again, the biggest thing we can say in terms of power when talking about Vaylin is that even Valkorian feared her and sought to dominate her. But anyway, my friends, what do you think of Vaylin, Empress of the Eternal Empire? Do you want this character to have more lore and recognition outside of the Old Republic campaign? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, as well as what other characters you'd like to see a breakdown of. Until next time, my friends, may the Force be with you, and long live the Eternal Empire.